What's going on, little screamers? Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, welcome. I am Nakul. So here on this channel, we really dive into the movies. We go into interesting fun facts, the actors, what inspired it, and all that good stuff. And at the end, that is whenever I do my thoughts and like a short little review on the movie and how I felt about it. And if you're returning, you obviously noticed Jules is not with me. I actually moved out from Jules's place. We were roommates in Nevada. I'm not gonna cry! Don't be started. It's alright. Anyway, but since her schedule is extremely hectic and she has pretty much no time, you are stuck with moi. Hopefully that's a good thing. But hopefully afterwards when her schedule settles down and we can figure out how to do these videos living in separate states and all that, the duo will be back. But enough of that, let's get on to the show. Today, we are doing the granddaddy of zombie movies. The movie that really started this whole genre, and that is George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead 1968 film. Unfortunately, Romero died in July 16, 2017, but it's co-written by John Russo. And this little gem was released October 1st, 1968, with a budget of $114,000, but it grossed $18 million internationally. Success? I think so. Yes. Good second drop, man. Yeah. The movie actually spawned a franchise that includes 5 official sequels released between 1978 and 2009, also directed by Romero. But since The Night of the Living Dead is a very basic zombie, ghoul, black and white effects and aesthetics and all that stuff, we're not going to go too crazy today. Since this film is in black and white, I'm going to do like a black, I'm going to do a gray base. And we're going to go from there and see how that is. Yeah.
This movie was met with huge controversy upon its release. The bulk of this controversy stemmed from 2 of the film's key components: its heavy use of violence and gore that carried an unconventional narrative, and its African-American lead protagonist, played by actor Dwayne Jones. A media news organization called The Wrap quoted, "Without Dwayne Jones in the lead, Night of the Living Dead would still have been an innovative shocker, but wouldn't have hit the cultural nerves it did." While half the critics were unable to see past the morally reprehensible and socially unacceptable violence, others viewed its subtext and applied it to the heavy social and cultural issues of the time, seeing it as an apt critique of modern life. Another news media website called Pop Matters stated this as well. It rejects all the American ideals on which previous narratives are supposed to have relied. The 2 lovers in the narrative are burned alive and eaten because they love one another too much to be separated. The forces of law and order are presented as a mindless and reactionary lynch mob who accidentally shoot the one remaining survivor at the end of the film. The people in the house do not even form themselves into a tight-knit community, but are largely destroyed by internal tensions and conflicts. A film critic named Roger Ebert was in attendance and recounted the experience at the time, saying, "The kids in the audience were stunned. There was almost complete silence. The movie had stopped being delightfully scary about halfway through and had become unexpectedly terrifying. There was a little girl across the aisle from me, maybe 9 years old, who was sitting very still in her seat and crying. I don't think the younger kids really knew what hit them. They were used to going to movies, sure, and they'd seen some horror movies before, sure, but this was something else. This was ghouls eating people up. And you could actually see what they were eating. This was little girls killing their mothers. This was being set on fire. Worst of all, even the hero got killed. But regardless of all the mixed reviews and controversy, this film is a genre-defining classic zombie horror film and was responsible for making Romero influentially known as a master of the modern zombie film and groundbreaking for its explicit violence, rawness, cannibalism, and somber ending."
How about we go on to fun facts I found on this gem of a film.
The original idea for the movie was to be an alien comedy where Russo suggested a film about hot-rodding teenage aliens that visit Earth and cause trouble with the help of a pet from outer space. That idea wouldn't work due to budget constraints, so Russo came up with an idea about a runaway boy who stumbles upon a field of corpses under glass that were rotting and would be consumed by aliens. Romero liked the flesh-eating angle, but ditched the rest. Romero was heavily inspired by I Am Legend. Supposedly, he basically admitted he ripped off Richard Matheson's horror novel, combining it with the flesh-eating angle that Russo had come up with. Romero came up with about 40 pages that Russo loved, including the opening in the cemetery, and then went to work on the script that would eventually become Night of the Living Dead. The blood was made from red ink and chocolate syrup, and when the little girl Kyra eats her father, Mr. Cooper, she's eating leftover crew lunches of hamburgers and meatball sandwiches smeared with chocolate syrup. They also did this with the scene with the lovers of the couple. They smothered chocolate and all that over ham, and they all got nauseous from this. Romero and Russo both appear in The Night of the Living Dead. Russo played a zombie that got hit with a tire iron, and Romero portrayed a reporter in the Washington, D.C. scenes, so be on the lookout for those. Dwayne Jones, who played Ben, actually fought for the sad ending, saying, and I quote, "I convinced George that the black community would rather see me dead than saved. After all that had gone on in a corny and symbolically confusing way. The heroes never die in American movies. The jolt of that and the double jolt of the hero being black seemed like a double-barreled whammy." Yeah, it was. I was so pissed. Oh my gosh, I was so pissed. And just completely flabbergasted after I read this fact. I was like, why? Well, this decision actually costed Romero early on. He stated, "We went to 4 or 5 distributors before going with Reed," said Romero in a separate interview. "Columbia showed a great deal of interest. In fact, they told us their main reason for turning it down was that it was a black and white, and AIP then said it was too unmitigated. They said, well, if you shoot a happy ending to the thing, or shoot the guy surviving, or develop a romantic interest, then maybe we'll talk about it." The film's distributors wanted to release it under the title Night of the Flesh Eaters. However, there was a 1964 film called The Flesh Eaters, and lawyers associated with that film threatened to sue. And I'm not going to lie, I kind of want to see this movie. And if you've seen it, definitely in the comments below, let me know how it was for you. However, editors did not add copyright notices to the beginning or end credits of the film. So, even though Romero and his team have fought in court, the film remains in the public domain, which is why any Tom, Dick, or Harry can come along and do whatever they want to it. However, one of the perks is you can see this on YouTube for free, like me. But in the end, Romero didn't see hardly any profits, which is really shitty. The character of Ben was originally written as a truck driver with a rough personality, but Jones revised his dialogue to reflect how he felt the character should be played. And bear with me here, this is the original dialogue they wrote for the truck driver. Okay, here we go. "Don't you mind the creep outside, I can handle him. There's probably gonna be lots more of them. Soon as they fin out about us. Out of gas. Them pumps over there is locked. Is there food here? Get us some grub. Then we beat him off and skedaddle. Guess you putz with the phone." So here is the same dialogue done by Dwayne. He rewrote as, and quote, "Don't worry about him. I can handle him. Probably a whole lot more of them when they find out about us. The truck is out of gas. The pump out here is locked. Is there a key? We can try to get out of here if we get some gas. Is there a key?" He tries the phone. He says, "So suppose you've tried this. I'll see if I can find some food." Oof, yeah, definitely happy for that revision. Before shooting, the actors would talk about what they wanted to portray, and then they would improvise when the cameras were rolling. Judith O'Dea, who played Barbara, remembered a specific time that she improvised heavily. She said, end quote, "The sequence where Ben is breaking up the table to block the entrance and I'm on the couch and start telling him the story of what happened, it's all ad-libbed. This is what we want to get across. Tell the story about me and Johnny in the car and me being attacked. We filmed it once. There was a concern we didn't get the sound right, but fortunately they were able to use it." Romero's budget started at $64,000, funded by 10 investors, including himself. The plan was to shoot until the money ran out, then use that shot footage to interest outside investors. And it worked, because it brought them to the budget of $114,000. Romero cast locals as zombies, even used local law enforcement in his film, even though he called them ghouls, not zombies. He casted crew members into small parts, and Johnny, Barbara's brother, is the producer, Russell Striner. They actually used his mom's car, the one in the beginning on the way to the cemetery, when she didn't use it to drive to work. Well, one day she got into an accident, but Russell told her not to get it fixed, where the crew then put the car crashing into the tree into the movie, which makes a lot of sense because at the time I was like, wow, this car is terrible. You touch it and it crumples underneath the slightest of weight, but it makes sense now. Okay. As a black man in 1960s America, Jones was concerned about how he would be viewed by the public after the film's release, specifically because of the scene where his character Ben punches Barbara in the face, knocking her out. Dwayne said, and quote, "You're asking me to hit a white woman. You know what's going to happen when I walk out of that theater?" Romero said, "We kept saying, come on, it's a new day." It's not that much of a new day. However, to him, with all the protesting going on in the 60s, I could see how movement was changing, and it is technically, you could see it as a new day. But, living in today's society, we have had pandemic, we have had another civil unrest. So it's, whenever you look back, you're like, no, I think that was a bit ignorant for him to say. I don't think he was understanding the full capacity of Dwayne's concern. But you can kind of get it from both sides, but I definitely think Dwayne had a very valid concern at that point. And honestly, that was the first thing that I thought of when I saw this film. I was hoping he didn't get any backlash or hate from that scene. However, Romero maintained in every interview that the racial commentary in the film was a happy accident. He cast Jones not because he was black, but because he was the best person who auditioned for the role. Because, in fact, in the original script, Ben was supposed to be white. The posse member who killed Ben was played by Vince Cervinski, who was also the production manager for the film. Cervinski had no idea about his key role. He thought he was just another gunman. End quote, he said, "I shot the hero without knowing it," he said. "I didn't know what I was shooting at in that scene until I saw the picture. The first time I saw it with an audience of kids at a matinee, I was afraid to leave the theater. I waited until they all left and snuck out a back door." Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. If I was that kid in that matinee and I recognized you shooting my hero, ooh, those Twizzlers, bunch of crunching popcorn was gonna do some damage. Oh, too much? Yeah, well, that's what I thought whenever he got shot. Kyra Shun, who plays a little girl zombie that eats her father and stabs her mother to death at the end of the film, has a website called The Ghoul Next Door, where she answers a lot of questions about her role in the film. Buried deeply in the facts is this little gem about fans, end quote. "One guy asked me to bite him on his arm so he could have my teeth marks inked over by a tattoo artist. Another guy asked me to bleed on his photograph. I cut my hand at a convention, was bleeding at the time. I obliged in both instances. I won't do either one again, so don't ask. I recently had a request for a lock of hair, saliva, blood, and so forth." And Shun is active in the fan community and attends conventions, as do the other remaining members of the crew and cast. That is just so crazy to me. There are super fans, and super fans are a whole nother level. They are on a planet of their own. I mean, as long as they're not hurting by taking this stuff, and I guess go for it, but just don't be an asshole. Don't be a stalker. All right? Just be a fan. Be cool. Judith Ridley, who played Judy, had this to say about the Naked Ghoul, quoting, "The night they filmed the nude ghoul, all of Evans City found out about it. They had their lawn chairs set up around the edges of the property. It was funny to see the rest of the zombies trying to keep their eyes elsewhere instead of looking down at the obvious places on the nude one." Yeah, that surprised me. I was taken aback whenever I saw that shot. I just wasn't expecting so much, it's brazen nudity in a 1960s film. It was, wow, yeah. And she is actually, was a model, new model for artists. So she's like, yeah, whatever, I'll do it. I do this for a living anyway. In 1990, Russo, Romero, and other collaborators from the original film re-teamed to remake Night of the Living Dead, with the hope that the project would help shore up their original copyright claims. Russo produced, Romero revised the original script, and makeup effects wizard Tom Savini, who would have worked on the original film had he not been serving Vietnam at the time, was brought in to direct. It was not well received. Then in 1998, Russo, Heinzman, Hardman, and actor-producer Russ Streiner, who played Johnny, decided to revisit the film for its 30th anniversary. Inspired by the Star Wars special editions, Russo wrote and filmed new scenes for the project, including an origin story for the cemetery ghoul. The effort was not well received either, unfortunately, and as for Romero, though he wasn't involved, he reported no bad blood between himself and his former collaborators. In 1999, the film was deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant by the Library of Congress and selected for preservation in the National Film Registry. In the zombie comic book series The Walking Dead, they honor this movie and Dwayne Jones by naming this little boy Dwayne Jones, which was really pretty freaking cool. I was able to find reviews at the time it was released and wanted to share them with you. So Variety labeled Night of the Living Dead an unrelieved orgy of sadism and questioned the integrity and social responsibility of its Pittsburgh-based makers. Ooh, ouch. And a New York Times critic, Vincent Canby, referred to the film as a junk movie, as well as spare, uncluttered, but really silly. This is what one of the things attracted me to this movie, that it was uncluttered. It wasn't grand, it wasn't opulent, it was bare, but it was raw, and it was simple, and I really liked that. It reminded me of The Evil Dead, you know? For me, the simpleness worked, and it was effective.
Pauline Kael called the film one of the most gruesomely terrifying movies ever made. And when you leave the theater, you may wish you could forget the whole horrible experience. The film's grainy, banal seriousness works for it, though. It gives it a crude realism. Exactly, Pauline. Oh, high five. Yes, you know what's up. A Film Daily critic commented, "This is a pearl of a horror picture that exhibits all the earmarks of a sleeper." So we had, like I said, there was a lot of mixed reviews with this film. People appreciated it. People thought it was, trash. There's one left. Critic Rex Reed wrote, "If you want to see what turns a B movie into a classic, don't miss Night of the Living Dead. It is unthinkable for anyone seriously interested in horror movies not to see it." So then while doing this, also found some interviews. I need to move on from this brown. Jesus. Get some reds in here. And George Romero. This was a 1970s interview by Variety. Rex Reed calls Living Dead crudely made. Does that bother you? He said no. I agree with him. Some of it's intentional. In other words, some of the graininess and some of the simplicity is intentional. We make a living making a glass of beer look like heaven, and we could have glossed this up too. This is one of the talents our shop has, making things look beautiful. Maybe that's why we went as far as the other ways we did. We used as often as possible what there was. We tried to be as unpretentious as possible in designing the sets, and we were. The house was bare. There was thought behind everything we brought into that farmhouse. The next question was, Newsweek called Dead a step beyond in gore. Was this intentional? He said it was, to the extent that we felt that films aren't usually made this graphic. But why not? You know what's happening. Why cut away when you know exactly what's going on? We got the intestines and we showed the ghouls going at them. And we said, well, we're just going to leave that stuff in. And then in IndieWire 2016, they asked, how does Night of the Living Dead resonate for you 48 years later? Listen, he said, we made the film. I thought we were talking about miscommunication. People who, even when faced with impossible and improbable situations, still argue among themselves about petty things rather than facing the problem. I find that this is still going on today. That's all I really care about. Then all of a sudden, it accidentally became a racial film because of the Dwayne Jones character. There's nothing in the dialogue or anywhere else that says this film is about race, but that's what made it become important, I guess. The next question was, it also addresses preconceived notions of domestic life. His response was, it was the idea of the family unit. Everything is falling apart. Back then in 1968, everything was suspect. Family, government, obviously the family unit in Night of the Living Dead completely collapses. That's what we focused on. I don't see the broader statements on race. The message is, hey, why can't we just get along? If they pull together, they'd be okay. And then Dwayne Jones did. So Dwayne Jones was a very, very private person in his life. Unfortunately, he died in July 22nd of 1988. But he was a very private person. After this movie came out, the last thing he wanted to do was show a lot of conventions and interviews. He didn't really want to talk about the film. So there is this rare interview, and there are 2 parts to it that he did, and I will link those in the description below so you can see them. They're on YouTube, part 1 and part 2. But this is what I got of the snippet from it that I wanted to share. The interview just states how he wished to stay private after the movie, not really talk about it, and rather talk about, Nicaragua, as he says in the interview, and that he has no regrets making the film. He said he had a great fun and felt everyone was considerate. There was no abuse, but rather a great camaraderie and good humor and goodwill. And later, after this movie, he was director of the Maguire, if I'm saying that right, Theater at the State University of New York at Old Westbury, and the artistic director of the Richard Allen Center for Culture and Art in Manhattan. I feel like if anybody tries to stay private in this day and age, that's almost like finding a damn unicorn. Refreshing. And the last interview I got a little snippet of was of John Russo. He says, I quote, "I doubt that our movie would have been a success without Dwayne Jones. His screen presence was one of the key ingredients that helped lift that low-budget pipe dream up by its bootstraps and make it into something that it almost had no right to be. The dream became reality partly because of the beloved Dwayne Jones." Yeah, like I said, I'm going to be super slow with putting makeup on by this time with a simple look. Other people would have been done by now. I'm not. But now we move on to thoughts. So like I said, I really did enjoy this movie. It captured me from the start. However, I just felt throughout this movie they were just too damn calm. It wasn't super realistic to me, but then again, everybody reacts in unique different ways. There are going to be people who are going to be super calm about it or just not say anything, or people who are going to be hysterical or just, it's all over the spectrum. You never freaking know. I wanted to go through the screen, grab everyone by the collar, be like, "It's a freaking zombie apocalypse, what are you doing? Freak out. Do stuff." I'm probably hysterical in this. God, I hope not. Maybe I'm the one who needs a slap in the face and then it'll just reset my whole nervous system and I'll be back on track. Romero actually commented on this. He said, and I quote, "I just wanted them to appear as though they were worried about a snowstorm or something." Yeah, you nailed it on that one. I didn't want anybody to get very intense with it, except in the areas where we just threw up our hands and went camp with it, and then we just had fun. In some sequences, I just wanted them to move and say lines rather than unobtrusively. Just get through it comfortably. However, one of the things I did really like was the style of this film, how it had a documentary feel, and how I really enjoyed that it was black and white, because it gave it a more ominous, creepy, grainy feeling. Because the ghouls, they aren't elaborate, they're pretty basic, but with the black and white and the way they shot it, it really brought out the sinister of the film. Ooh, my absolute favorite of this whole movie was the close-up of the dead woman on top of the stairs. Oh, so good. It's so freaking good. And then, of course, whenever he goes and drags the woman, her face is completely back to normal. It's like, oh, oops. And then when Kyra, the child, ate the dad, I was so happy. I almost got up and did a fucking happy dance. I was so excited. Because his character is just a freaking bigot asshole. It was just, I hope you die first, and I hope you get eaten slowly. So the moment he went downstairs, because she's going to be turned into a zombie. You know that. So the moment he goes down there alone by himself with a child, he started walking down those steps, because I was just up to the screen. I was like, all right, Kyra, this is your moment to shine. This is your moment to kill the little bigot asshole. And she did. I actually liked how Ben was very protective and gentle of Barbara. However, at the same time, I get it. She was getting a little hysterical at the very end of her story of her and Johnny, and she, slapped you in the face. You could have easily restrained her. She was not putting up a fight. She had hardly any strength to her. You could have easily just restrained her into a chair or something. There was absolutely no reason. It was entirely unnecessary to just straight clock her out. That was oh my God. So whenever that happened, I felt like I got hit in the freaking jaw. It really, what? Did we not escalate the situation? Are we not overreacting a little bit on this here? So what if she slapped you in the face? And also, so right before that happened, he was talking about his incident whenever he first met the zombies and how it was traumatizing to him. And guess what? She sat there listening, but she sat there and listened to you and didn't give you any incredulous or scrutinizing, judgmental looks. And then the moment she started talking about her traumatizing experience, mind you, this is the first time she's spoken since the beginning of the movie with her and Johnny in the cemetery. And the moment she talks, you look at her like, he is straight annoyed and almost like a hair smidgen appalled that she's even talking about her tragedy, her incident with the zombies. And he's like, oh, you need to calm down. It's just stop, just calm down. And this is the point where she hasn't even gone hysterical yet. She's just sitting there like a child recounting the experience. And he's being an asshole about it, as if you couldn't be bothered. I didn't understand how Barbara's brain basically broke. She morphed into pretty much an asylum patient after she had that encounter with the zombie or the ghoul at the cemetery. I just find that was over-exaggerated and a bit unrealistic. I mean, the ghoul, he wasn't eating any intestines, he wasn't ripping anybody apart, he wasn't decrepit, he wasn't decaying. In zombie standards, he was pretty put together. He was hardly a freaking zombie. And he didn't tear apart Johnny. You didn't even see him really bite him. He just knocked his head into a headstone and he laid there. And then all of a sudden it's like, her mind just broke. She went into another dimension of survival that she couldn't get out of for the longest time until the very end of the movie. And then, of course, Johnny came and they were reunited forever in the zombie ghoulish world. Poetic. So beautiful. The zombie apocalypse broke out. My mind might break too. I'm like, take me away at this point. I'm just here. But she does. She just looks at a doily piece of white lace cloth and so she reverted back to a child. It was very, very weird. And then the last thing was, I wanted to slap the boyfriend Tom, who told his girlfriend in a gentle, almost sweet, that is ultimately a degrading sentence of, and I quote, "Oh, you sure are no use at all, are you?" While hugging her, because she wasn't, so her job was to take cloths apart and stick them on the jars to make a cocktail, motive cocktail? The ones that explode and you throw out. But that was her job, just to rip apart cloths to make the wick, essentially. And she's freaking out. She's like, I don't want you to go out there. I'm worried. I love you and all this stuff. And he's like, you gotta keep it together. She's like, why don't we just stay? And he's like, TV said we shouldn't, so we're not. And he's like, come on, you gotta get it together. You gotta do this. While he's hugging her, he's like, where's that smile for me? And she just hugs him tight. He's like, well, you're just no use at all, are you? Look here, Tom. I want to shove that cocktail right up your arse. How use is that for ya? Sorry, that was a little hostile. Just want to slap him across the face. Look, we haven't really gotten that far with the makeup, but it'll get there, I promise. All in all, I really enjoyed The Night of the Living Dead. Ben, Dwayne Jones, who played Ben, he is just a tall, dark, beautiful man who played it great. I really enjoyed watching him. You know, the acting was good. It wasn't terrible. For such a low budget film, this was really good. I really actually enjoyed how simple the ghouls were. I think that's almost more terrifying than seeing today's standards of a flesh-eating zombie, just for the fact of their nature is plastered all over on their outside. You can see that this person isn't a human being anymore. They're gone. They're kill them. But in this movie, it's so simple. I mean, these ghouls, some of them, like the Naked Ghoul, she's just naked with a little bit of makeup on her face. All of these people have such minimal makeup and prosthetics that it's unnerving, because you still see them as a human being. You don't see them as a creature of the undead. You just see them as a crazy person with humanity still intact, if that makes sense. So to me, the Romero's version of a zombie is a bit more terrifying and unnerving than today's standards. But I'm going to finish this look up, and I will be back in a jiff to complete the Romero's Ghoul look. Here we go!
Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the facts that I was able to get. And also, I just want to say, go to IMBD. They have a ton of trivia on there that I think you would really enjoy. If you enjoyed this video, please put a like and subscribe and the notification bell so you know when the next video will be. I was hoping I would get this one in February, but unfortunately with difficulties of every kind, I wasn't able to. But thanks again for tuning in. You guys have an awesome week, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.